Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Gaylord National Harbor Convention Center right outside Washington, D.C., where we're covering the Air Force Association's annual Aerospace and Cyber Conference and Trade Show. Our coverage here is sponsored by L3 Technologies and Leonardo DRS, and we're honored to have with us General Ellen Polikowski, who is the commander of the Air Force Materiel Command. Ma'am, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure, Vargo.
We'll talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of agile software, because that video that we taped when you spoke in front of the Mitchell Institute is something that's still very, very popular on our website. But what I want to ask you now is, in a time of budgetary constraints, you have a huge challenge to help support a vast, aging, as General Deptula loves saying all the time, an increasingly geriatric aircraft fleet. What are some of the techniques you're using? Whether it's for an additive manufacturer, novel ways of delivering that logistical support to keep this aging force running.
Okay, well, aging force, as you characterized, are a big issue for us. And we see every day the impact that it has on us. First of all, just making sure that the airplanes are safe to fly. So we've had to implement additional inspections. And so some of the things we're trying to do in order to make that rapid or more quickly be able to do the additional inspections is new and innovative non-development, non-destructive inspections. And if at the Air Force Research Labs booth today, you can see something we call snakes on planes, and it's a way of using robotics to go in and examine where there may be corrosion inside of airplanes. But when it comes to our logistics depots, where we have to repair the parts and to perform the overhauls of the airplanes, we've got major issues associated with diminishing manufacturing sources. And that's where we're looking at opportunities that things like additive manufacturing can provide us. Sometimes these parts have not been built in 20, 30 years. And by using additive manufacturing, we can actually look whether we can dramatically reduce the amount of cycle time it takes us to get a part in. As opposed to 18 months, I can give you an example of where we used additive manufacturing on the C5, and we delivered a part in 4 weeks and went from $1,600 a piece to $300 a piece.
Right.
So those are all some of the things we're doing. Another area that you talked about that is becoming more and more critical is the integration of the software into all of our weapon systems. So we're looking at techniques like agile software development, like bringing the coders on side by side with the operators and our maintainers to be able to rapidly improve the capabilities or to address shortfalls by using agile software development techniques.
Cobra Harigian actually talked about that, where you guys developed a software development tool for him on the tanker side of things that has been adopted in the rest of the Air Force now. And when we talked to Dewey Everhart, one of the things he was talking about was the bearing failure that he experienced on his C5 fleet that grounded it until, thank God there were airplanes at Davis-Monthan that could be rated for that.
Well now, Vargo, we like to call Davis-Monthan our air power reservoir. Because that's where
true.
we keep our reservoir things. And yeah, that's an interesting story, because that part that failed, we had bought large quantities of it in the beginning of the C5, and we've never used it because it was so reliable. But the C5, older system, now we're starting to see parts that we had never seen fail before fail. And that was a catch we had to do, which was to take those parts out and check them and put them on. But we don't want to be there. We want to replace that part before it fails. So we have a very aggressive effort in sustaining engineering to look at whatever data we can have available on our aircraft to identify and predict ahead of time when we're going to have issues, so that we don't have to do that diving save that we did for General Eberhard on the C5.
What do you see as, as you look out on the force, where are you, green, where are you yellow, where are you red, as you do some of this predictive analysis because each one of those things are going to require significant resources to address. Are you already starting to make a list of things that you're like, look, some of this stuff may come due a lot earlier or a lot sooner than we think it will because of the utilization rates on everything? I mean, whether it's C-17, C-5s, even on the aging fighter force, there is a lot of wear and tear on these systems, especially as the replacements, whether it's KC-46 or anything else, get delayed.
Well, we're seeing the excellent example of that, Vago, is the F-22. We're flying that 15, 16, 20% more than we had planned due to its tremendous role it's playing in the current fight. And as a result of that, the engines are coming up for overhaul sooner. We're seeing some new, what were unknown things associated with the special materials that the F-22 has on it. And
right.
So we've had to increase our efforts in those areas. We are working very closely with our engine provider, Pratt & Whitney, to accelerate and to get the overhaul line stood up. So that F-22 in particular is one that we're seeing those impacts of increased usage. But in addition to that, you may have heard we have a pilot shortage. And
we have heard that. We talked to Mobile Homes about it as well as Dewey.
Right. Well, Mobile's pilot shortage is a tremendous task on us to improve the aircraft availability and enable them to fly much more frequently. He needs to increase his sortie rate, not just on the training systems that are in Air Education and Training Command, but in all of the weapon systems so that they can use the same number of airplanes and generate more training missions. So we have an extensive effort working with General Cooper to look at what are the parts, additional ordering of parts, trying to get out ahead, looking at streamlining those inspections we talked about. We are looking to try to reduce the amount of time those planes need to be not in the hands of our pilots so that we can meet the capacity increase in training that is going to be needed as we start to increase the number of pilots we bring in every year. So that's an example of where the demand signal on the Air Force translates to Air Force Materiel Command that we have to step up our game and we have to be smarter and we have to be better at how we go about tackling these issues.
Two-part question. Part one of the question is, we're another continuing resolution, so everybody has continuing resolution stress disorder. What does that mean when you're under a continuing resolution, given that you are a logistics provider, you're the spare parts provider, you're the acquisition authority? I mean, you play all of these roles with so many different hats, from technology development, literally cradle to grave in terms of a lot of these systems. What are the kind of challenges that presents you when you're operating such a vast fleet?
Well, continuing resolution is a challenge for Air Force Materiel Command across the board because everything from if we have new start programs that the Air Force is expecting us to do to activities associated in the depots. We have to plan which airplanes are going to go in. And if there's some uncertainty associated with particularly like a year like this year and last year where we really don't know what the final answer will be with the Budget Control Act looming on us, we can get ourselves in situations where we have to delay aircraft going into the field, delay award of contracts for parts. In fact, we're struggling a little bit with that right now on the A-10 as we're starting to look at what we need to do to get the new wings in, for example.
Right.
So at best, it makes us be less efficient and effective in how we manage the dollars in the workforce. At worst, we have impact in the fact that we have airplanes that don't get into the depot, that aren't then available for our airmen to fly.
If you had more money, where would you put it? I mean, if Santa Fingers Goldfein decides that or wherever you manage to get more money, where would you put that money in the system that you're running right now?
For the Agile Combat Support, my first priority would be to put it into my workforce. We are too small for what we're asked to do. And so my priority would be to strengthen my civilian and my military workforce, to increase the numbers, to increase their training, to That would be absolutely my first priority. My second priority would be to put the investment into those things that we need for air-based resiliency. You know, General O'Shaughnessy right now is looking at challenges about how is he able to sustain operations in that vast Pacific. General Walters is now dealing with a smaller infrastructure in Europe as we see the threats there. And of course, General Harigian down at CENTCOM has also got challenges. And they all turn to us for the things that they use to support their air bases. So everything from the test equipment that we put out there for our maintainers to test, to the shelters, all of those things is where I would put the next dollar in so that we can be there and able to support those war fighters that are out there every day.
Do you have a sense on how many people would be required? Is it, you know, do you have a number in your head?
Well, we have documented that we're short between 2,000 and 3,000 people.
Right.
So it's not a small number. We have 80,000 people within Air Force Materiel Command, so it's not quite 10%, but it's it's about 4 or 5% of our workforce.